Hey everyone, welcome back. We are on day 3, our final day of this unit when it comes to learning new content. And this is day 3 of personality. So we're going to end up by talking about trait theory and social cognitive theory. So just a quick review of what we've covered with our personality portion of this unit. So we started off with psychoanalytic with our buddy Freud, and then we talked about the psychodynamic approach, the neo-Freudians of Jung, Adler, and Horney, who kind of branched off of his ideas and made them their own. And then we have the humanistic perspective of personality, has our friends Carl Rogers and Abraham Maslow. And then today what we're going to be talking about is trait theory, which is kind of the most typical one that comes to mind, I think, for a lot of us when it comes to personality. We think of it as different traits of being, open, closed-minded, neat, messy, nice, mean, whatever. So this is kind of where these come from. And then we have the social cognitive with our buddy Bandura here, who is the bashing Bobo. So again, showing that it's all about our social and cultural environment that we're raised in. And what we're seeing in that environment is shaping our personality and behavior. So they're all the way on that right-hand spectrum when it comes to nurture as being the dominant factor in determining our personality. So to get started, we're going to go right into trait theory. So again, this is the one that kind of makes the most sense for us probably when it comes to our personality. So a trait, I think of a trait as just a building block of our personality. So a trait is something like being introverted, extroverted, organized, messy, nice, mean, warm, cold, aloof, whatever. So think of those singular different traits build up to make our personality. So our definition here is a trait is just stable personality characteristics and patterns of behavior that are presumed to exist with an individual and guide his or her thoughts and actions under various conditions. So the big thing with this definition here is that these are stable patterns. So they're, again, like I said, personality, it's long-lasting and enduring. And they say here that it's under various situations or various conditions. So they're saying it should be consistent. You should be in different, even though there's different situations. So they're kind of disagreeing with the social cognitive people. They're saying even if there's different situations, you should be having this relatively stable personality over the course of your life, right? It might not be the same in childhood as adulthood, but once you hit that adulthood and you're mature, it should be pretty relatively stable and enduring. So I will use my favorite example of all time in psychology, which is The Sims, to kind of further explain this. So in The Sims, for those of you who play, you get a person and you build them, and then you get to choose their personality traits or characteristics. So here you're going to see they could choose like 4 or 5 things that would make up her personality. So each of these is a different trait. So you could choose for her to be materialistic. You could choose for her to be neat. You could choose for her to be ambitious. So these are all different traits. And once you put those together, all those traits are going to build and then form her overall personality. So The Sims is a great example of this. And we're going to talk about in a sec how The Sims kind of shows some factor analysis going on as well. All right. So we're going to go through a couple of the different trait theorists. So the first one we need to know is Gordon Allport. He's important because he was kind of the one who really got the trait theory up and running and kind of was the first one to really describe personality in this way. So he identifies 3 different types of traits. So the first ones that kind of form the core of our personality are called central traits. So these are a small number of significant tendencies that you have. So these are kind of things just that kind of form the basis of our personality, like being kind, loyal, like good-natured, good-hearted. So these are kind of general things that are forming those personalities, the core of your personality. Then we have secondary traits, and these are things that are still important, But whereas the central traits are things that are guiding your everyday personality, so you're seeing these shown through your behavior each day. Secondary traits only present themselves in kind of specific circumstances, and they're more like your preferences and attitudes rather than your overall tendencies of being like kind or loyal. So, an example of a secondary trait here is that let's take a specific situation in which you had to give a presentation in front of the class. So you're going to get nervous. But that's something that's a secondary trait, is getting nervous when you're public speaking, because it's not something that's guiding your everyday personality, but it arises in that specific situation of having to give a presentation for the class. So it's still something that's important in your personality, but it's more like a quirk or something that's a little bit less significant for your everyday personality. Then the final one, this is his big kind of trademark, is he comes up with these things called cardinal traits. So these are like the one single most important and consistent trait in your life. But these typically don't showcase themselves until later in life because you have to take time to develop and figure out who you are and what your kind of legacy is. So the one single trait that defines you. So someone like Scrooge, right? He's super greedy. So greed would be his cardinal trait. Or Mother Teresa, right? She's super kind-hearted and selfless. So altruism, being altruistic, that is her one cardinal trait that defines her. And then we have Raymond Cattell. So he comes up with a bunch of different ones. He has 16 personality factors that he says are the building blocks of our personality. So these are going on kind of a different dimensions. So let's give an example. We don't need to know all 16 of these, but you could just look at a couple. So let's say something like rule consciousness. So are you a rule follower? So this would be, there's dimensions to this, right? You could be at the complete right of the spectrum and being very rule conscientious, very much a rule follower, listens to authority, does what they're supposed to do. Or you could be on the other end of the spectrum, you're kind of rebellious. You don't like to listen to authority and conform to the rules. We have warmth. So say you're a warm person on this right side of the spectrum, very loving, very kind-hearted and giving. And then you could have someone on the very other end of the spectrum who's very cold, very aloof, and that kind of a thing. And he used factor analysis. So you're going to see, I'm going to bring up this term again multiple times. This factor analysis, this was the term that we talked about in the intelligence unit, and they used that for intelligence tests to see how you performed on different parts of an IQ test or an intelligence test. So they're going to look for things that cluster. So like, okay, this person did well on the math portion of their ECT. And they also did well on the English portion. Okay, it looks like they're clustering in their performance. So that's what they used for that idea of the general intelligence, because they're saying that typically they found clusters in that people on their IQ test, if they're doing well in one subject like math, they're typically going to perform high on reading, science, English, whatever. So here, factor analysis, they're using this to find clusters of personality traits that are related. So let's go back to The Sims and use our example of factor analysis. So we have here, let's say ambition and something like being, what would work with this one? Maybe neat. So ambition and being neat might be something that's going to cluster together because those traits are kind of seen. So people who are ambitious and successful and driven might also be neat and organized and have their lives together, right? Maybe I'm not, I would say I'm ambitious, but I'm also not the most neat person, but that's okay. But let's also say here something like lazy, and I think we have messy over here. Yeah, slob. So lazy and slob, those ones would kind of cluster together as well. So they could see that if you're taking a personality test, that those traits are typically coming up multiple times together. So they can see, okay, it looks like these two things are related. So maybe these are forming a significant part of a personality. So they're using factor analysis to find some clusters of related terms that are kind of seeing the connectedness between them. Okay. So then we have this guy named Eysenck, and he kind of, instead of doing 16, he's kind of on the other end of the spectrum and only comes up with two main kinds of dimensions of our personality. So rather than 16, he has two. So he ties it down to extroversion versus introversion, right? Because these are on spectrums, on scales. And then emotional stability versus neuroticism. So extroversion, this is being talkative, outgoing, sociable. And then versus introversion would be kind of a loner, quiet, someone who likes to spend time just alone by themselves. So this is the one scale they're looking at, the one dimension. And then the second one is emotional stability versus neuroticism. So if something's neurotic, you're very emotional, you're really kind of shifting all over in your emotions, kind of unstable, emotional, and not really kind of set. So emotional stability, being relatively together, versus neuroticism and being unstable. So he, you see here, narrows it down to these two dimensions. And you guys will get a chance to take this one in your personality inventory project. So the most important thing I want us to know, probably out of all the personality stuff, I think, is Costa's Big 5 Factors, which we use the acronym OCEAN for. So he's saying, Costa basically says, okay, Cattell was too much with 16, that's a lot, but Eysenck was too little with just two dimensions. So let's kind of take 5 core things. They use factor analysis, kind of see what's related, and then bring these to make just 5 overall things that determine your personality. So his big 5, we need to know these. So know this OCEAN acronym, that's easy to remember. And then, geez, my light is going crazy. So know these for the AP exam. So we have openness to experience. These are dimensions. So you could be open or you could be kind of closed-minded, right? Conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And these spell out OCEAN. So let's go through these. So first one is openness to experience. So obviously, if you're high scoring, you would be very open to trying new things. You're imaginative, creative, original. You're someone who's very open-minded. So this is kind of the person that I'd want to travel the world with, right? They have a very open mind and are really liking to try new things and be creative and original. If you're low scoring, then you would be kind of more conventional, more into tradition, not so curious. You'd be a little bit more closed-minded, and you'd want to stick to what you know. Stick to the status quo, like High School Musical. So then second one, we have conscientiousness. So if you're high scoring on this really means that you're a very diligent, reliable person. You're hardworking, you're well organized, you're punctual. You are someone that I would want to work in a group project with because this is someone you can count on. If you're low scoring, then you're more negligent, lazy, disorganized. Maybe you're late, you're not very punctual. So you're kind of more on a mess and not so reliable. Then we have extroversion, like I went over. So if you're high on extroversion, you're very talkative, social, outgoing. You're someone who's very comfortable meeting and talking with new people. So you're the kind of person that, I'd want to talk to at a party or something like that. And then low scoring with extroversion would be you're kind of a loner or quiet, more reclusive. You're going to hang out with yourself and not be really putting yourself out there in social situations as much. So you're much more introverted. And then we have agreeableness. So if you're high scoring on this, you are just a really easy person to get along with. So you're trusting, kind, warm, good natured, just a very easy, agreeable person to deal with in everyday life and get on with. So I'd want someone who's agreeable as my coworker or friend. Very non dramatic, nice, easy person to get along with. If you're low scoring, you're more irritable, cold, aloof, not very friendly. You might come off kind of rough around the edges, right? And then finally, we have neuroticism, and I went over this. So you can see that he took a little bit of Eysenck's and kind of made it his own. So neuroticism, we said if you're high on that, you're very anxious, very emotional. Your emotions are kind of in flux. So you're really worried and fearful all the time. But then if you're low scoring, you'd be very mellow, calm, even-tempered, secure in yourself, very one with your emotions and understanding how to control those. If you're high scoring, you're kind of in flux. If you're low scoring, you're very together. And then again, using factor analysis with the big five, you'll see here that they looked for correlations between traits to see which ones are clustering together. So again, to make sense of this, you could see something like punctual, diligent, neat, organized. These are traits, and they combine these, they narrow it down to say, okay, this makes up conscientiousness. So instead of having all those 16 or a bajillion and 20 traits that are making up our personality, they narrow them down and group them and cluster them together to make up conscientiousness. So some issues that arise with the trait perspective is what sociocognitive theorists are actually going to come up with and say is that sometimes our traits depend more on the situation. So you're going to see a lot of instances in which, yeah, someone's really, a very nice, well-mannered person, but maybe they're going to behave differently in this situation. So again, it could be dependent on the situation, and our personality might not be as stable as the trait theorists think. But trait theorists are going to come back and say, yeah, look at this. So over the course of our lifetime, we really do kind of become more set in our personality the older we get. So there's still back and forth on this. Is it more the situation that our personalities might not be as stable as we think in different environments? Or is our personality, like the trait theorists say, is it relatively stable and the same over time? Then, real quick note on the behavioral theory of personality, they don't really have one because they don't believe that we have an enduring personality. So, behaviorists, remember, they're really far on that idea of it being nurture over nature. And they're saying that it's really our environment, that we shouldn't think of any cognitive process of what's going on in here. It's all our environment that's shaping us. So they don't think we have an enduring personality because they're saying everything's due to our environment and the rewards and punishments that we're getting. So someone they're gonna be motivated to do something, not because their personality, but because they're getting a reward or punishment for it. So they don't really believe in that long-lasting personality. They said it's all the situation, right? They said we're like a blank slate, tabula rasa, from my modern world people, saying that it's that, and that it's all the environment that's shaping us, nothing really from our own selves. We don't really have our own unique personality, really. So now we got social cognitive. So again, these are the people who are saying that, yeah, there's maybe some cognitive component to our personalities, but there also is that important social component, and that our environments do have an important role in determining our personality. So they're saying that social cognitive, right? It's an interaction that takes place between a person, so your cognitive thinking and internal processes, and their social environment. And what Bandura, remember Bandura, he had the bashing Bobo dolls with observational learning. So he's all about saying that it is really important to look at social learning and our social environment. So Bandura, he comes up with the term reciprocal determinism. So this is an important term to know. If you look at that FRQ repeatedly used terms page, this is one that comes up. So he's saying that our personality is shaped by an interaction of behavioral, internal cognitive processes, and their environment. So if you look here, we have our behavior. So this is also influenced by the environment we are in and how we think about it in our personality, kind of internal stuff. So I'll give an example here that makes sense. So here's our personal or cognitive factors that we're thinking about. So let's say you're a soccer player. So you're thinking to yourself, cognition, right? I like soccer, it's fun. And therefore, that's going to result in you spending more time at the field and at the gym training. So it's influencing what your environment is. And your environment is now influencing your behavior. Because you're spending all this time at the gym and at the field, you're now hanging out with your teammates and a bunch of different athletes. So now you've gotten new friends. And then this goes back to saying, wow, I have all these friends. I'm enjoying hanging out with people. I like soccer. It's fun. I like having friends. So these are all influencing one another. Your cognitive thoughts, the environment you're in, and your behavior are all interconnected and influencing one another simultaneously. Okay, so our final theory related to cognition is Rotter's locus of control theory. So you might have heard this one before because we talked about it a little bit in our learning unit, but I just wanted to rehash this again. One, because it's also connected here, and two, because it's super duper important. This is something that comes up on FRQs often on AP, so I want to go over this again, and this is a good place to do it as well. So Rotter's locus of control theory says that there's kind of two personalities when it comes to how you cognitively view your destiny and the amount of control that you have in your life. So he says that there's people with internal and external locuses of control. And if you have an internal locus of control, you really see a connection between the effort you're putting in and the outcome. So you see that, I put a lot of work into something and therefore I got an A on this test. That is solely due because I studied really hard and put a bunch of effort and time into it. And then if you didn't do so well on something, on the other hand, maybe you failed your exam, you're going to say, yeah, I'm going to take ownership and say that I didn't work hard enough, I didn't study, I was distracted, I had other things going on. That's on me. So people with internal locus of control see the outcomes in their life as being connected and controlled by them and their effort that they put into things. So if you have an internal locus of control, you really believe in yourself and think, yeah, if I work hard, I can make things happen. But on the contrary, they take ownership. So if they didn't do well on something, they're going to say, okay, well, this is my fault. I need to work harder or whatever next time. And then on the other hand, you have people with the external locus of control. So if you have an external locus of control, you're going to see, I don't see the connection between the outcome and the effort that they're putting in. So they don't see that they have control over their lives. They really think that things are out of control and out of their hands. So let's do the example of taking a test again. So say they got an A on a test. They did really well. People with an external locus of control are going to say, oh, well, I was just really lucky. The test was easy. They're not going to make a connection between the effort that they put in and the outcome because they don't see themselves as having control over their outcomes in life. And then on the other hand, say they failed the test. They're going to say, oh, well, that's not my fault. The teacher hates me. The teacher's mean. It was too hard. I had all this stuff going on, blah, blah, blah. So external people don't really see themselves as having control over their lives, whereas internal people really see that connection and take ownership for what they have going on in their lives. So remember, I had you guys do that little writing reflection thing when we talked about this in the learning unit, and you had to answer some questions of, do you think that even when you work hard, things don't go your way? Do you see hard work as kind of being the ultimate factor in contributing to success? That kind of a thing. So think back to this. This idea of locus of control is very important in AP Psych, and I really see this as a teacher too. So if I were to take your results and look at people with internal and external locus of control, I could probably predict even before I see your results, just based on what I know about you as a student and the work you put in. I could probably pinpoint who has an internal and external locus of control based on what I see with your work ethic and how you really challenge yourself in the class. So a really important term I believe in wholeheartedly too. So good one to know. All right. So homework for today. Your personality project is due tomorrow. So turn that into the Dropbox once you're done. And then Unit 6 FRQs are tomorrow as well. So remember that those you are signing up for on the little form on Google Classroom. So there's the 3 times, and it's going to be 3 different FRQs. So you'll get 30 minutes to take that, depending on, it'll be at a different time for you though. So it could be, I did a morning, early morning, late morning, and then afternoon time. And if you don't have a time that works for you, let me know and we can figure that out. So this will get us prepared because remember the AP exam now is going to be solely FRQ based. So I want us to get some real experience of what that's going to feel like taking that on a computer and that kind of a thing. So just to recap, most important thing I want us to know from this is the big 5 factors. Remember it by Ocean. Be able to explain and understand what these mean. And then reciprocal determinism is a very important term with Bandura and social cognitive theory. And then locus of control. So those are the 3 things that I really want us to take home with us after today. Alrighty. Have a nice day, you guys.